when I was in college in freshman year. I didn't know what I wanted to do. But something kind of always told me that there was more to the world than just what we saw, just what we interacted with. In high school, I had been exposed a little bit to Carl Jung, and before that, in elementary school, I would play pretend a lot. And I know everyone has played pretend and has probably been exposed to some type of mystic or esoteric philosopher, but these things affected how I approached what I wanted to do and where I was going to go in life. So it made me think a lot about I don't want to say the mystical experience that exists in our lives, but the fact that there are things all around us that are magical. I mean, it's hard not to use the word magic to describe it, but that was my take, was that there was magic in the world, metaphysical thing, vibes, auras, I don't know, whatever you want to call it. All that shit was real to me. And so but I knew that I didn't know any magic practice, any, way to practice this or even pursue it. Like, I knew I could have read books about magic for sure, and later on in my life I did. I ended up doing that, but at the time I had this idea about resource and how magic and resource for me went hand in hand. The really magical thing about art that I saw was how an artist could take a medium, whether it be a pen and paper or a sculpture or if they're an actor, their body, or a dancer, their movements, and how they can create a very abstract expression of a feeling or thoughts or memories within the audience. So that was what I had exposure to. I had exposure to art, and I had exposure to games. Stories and games were the two things that I felt I could practice this idea of magic with. So originally, I wanted to create a story, tell a story that was about my life, but not about my life. A fable, kind of. Of course, it's kind of also egotistical to spend your life thinking that by telling a story about yourself, you are participating in some type of esoteric magic, right? And it wasn't exactly that. It was more like I legitimately believed that you can find magic, that you can find the metaphysical, the magical, the ethereal, whatever you want to call it. You could find that in actually any practice. It was just about pursuing that practice in the right way. So that's when I really started to think about my life as a story, almost like my life and my thoughts and all of that stuff. I mean, obviously it was a story because it was, you know, cause and effect. Something happened to me, it affected me. Something else happened to me, it affected me, etc., 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 until I became who I was at that time. But by structuring my understanding, or like changing my view or perspective of my understanding, it might, I thought, give me more clarity into who I was and into like practicing this type of magic. Now, I know, people hear the word magic and they automatically discount it. Deeply connected to magic. So I don't want to be too, broad with that, but that's just what I've noticed. I wanted to understand archetypes more. I wanted to understand personalities, roles that we live out and play within. Um, and I saw the archetypes, and I saw that as a type of almost test or game. That constantly we were playing a game that you know whose sum was who we are. The sum of our quote unquote points. I mean, I don't even know if I would call points. I wouldn't. Would I even call it a point system? I don't know how you would qualify it, but through some type of system, one could anchor or ground who they are into a certain type of archetype. But the only way you can do that is if you give some things value, right? If you say, well, if you do this thing, then it kind of is like the value of a hero. Or if you do this thing, it's the value of a villain. Now, I know that when it comes to living and being, there are an infinite amount of things someone could be. You can be a witch, you can be a kind witch, you can be a mean witch, you can be a chaotic witch, and that's just an example for a witch, right? Ad infinitum, right? You can always add more to what an archetype is and what qualifies an archetype. You can always add more to it. You can always dig deeper into it. And then I realized, but I realized for what I wanted to do, which was just see the world through a system that allowed me to see the magical elements of it. I could just maybe create my own system, and that would be the game of the world I played within. And, the story would be me figuring out and researching and exploring the magic that's around us. And all of this led to one of my first pieces of writing, which was called The Liminality of Twilight City. And in the liminality of Twilight City, I wrote a character. I created a character called Jack Friday. And the idea of the character was that the character became aware of the story that they were within, and through this awareness of their story, they were able to manipulate the story through an understanding of archetypes and an understanding of how the world would work. And when I was writing this, I also realized that this character needed to have something that could be analogous for this type of awareness and this artistic liberty or poetic freedom. Yeah. And so the character, Jack Friday, finds this piece of paper called the Trickster License. And on the Trickster License is written the words, "Get the sun and bring it home."